Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack complex topics, really get you those vital insights fast.
That's the plan.
And today we're diving headfirst into something that, well, it sparks a lot of debate. Often quite simplified debate, actually. It's this deeply ingrained idea that Islam, that its core tenets are somehow inherently incompatible with democracy and human rights.
Right. You hear it constantly. It shapes global conversations, sometimes even policy, like you said. It's a really persistent misconception.
It really is.
And our mission here in this deep dive is to properly unpack that. We want to go straight to the sources. We'll be looking at foundational Islamic texts, the Quran, the Sunnah, which are, the Prophet Muhammad's teachings and practices.
The core stuff.
Exactly. Plus historical accounts and, importantly, modern examples from Muslim-majority nations, too.
Okay.
The goal really is to carefully separate the religious principles from, let's say, the political realities and the cultural interpretations that often muddy the waters.
Yeah. That sounds crucial, offering a clearer, more nuanced view for you listening.
Hopefully, yes.
So let's start right there at that perceived disconnect. Often critics will point to certain countries, maybe with undemocratic regimes, and just say, see, told you, Islam opposes democracy.
Right. That leap gets made all the time.
But is that truly a religious issue at its heart? Or are we maybe looking at something else entirely?
Well, this is what's so fascinating when you actually dig in. The perceived incompatibility. It's overwhelmingly political. It's not fundamentally religious.
Okay.
If you look into the core principles of Islamic governance, as they're laid out in the Quran and Sunnah, you find they actually mirror quite a few democratic ideals. Surprisingly so for many people.
Such as?
We're talking fundamental concepts, things like shura.
Consultation.
Exactly, consultation. Then there's adl.
Justice.
Justice, yes. And the absolutely vital idea of accountability, holding leaders accountable.
That's a pretty strong claim, especially given the common narrative we just mentioned. So let's break that down. Shura, first consultation. What did that actually look like back then in early Islamic societies? Was it, genuinely participatory or more just advisory, maybe?
It's quite remarkable, actually. These principles like Shura, they really laid groundwork for participatory governance centuries ago.
Right.
It challenges that whole notion that these ideas are purely modern or Western inventions.
Right.
The Quran itself, it directly instructs believers to consult among themselves. That's in Surah 42, verse 38.
Okay.
You see it in practice. The Prophet Muhammad himself, he routinely sought advice from his companions, and not just on minor things, on critical military issues, social issues.
So it wasn't just for show?
No, not at all. It wasn't tokenism. Decisions were genuinely influenced by that collective input.
Okay, that active early form of participatory governance, how does that then parallel or maybe connect to modern democratic systems? With universal suffrage, open elections, that sort of thing.
Well, modern democracy, it formalizes consultation through those mechanisms you mentioned, universal suffrage, elections.
Right.
Now, classical Islamic models, they didn't use elections exactly as we know them today, obviously, but leaders were chosen after significant consultation, often among key community members, the influential figures. And critically, this is important, they could actually be removed by consensus.
Removed by consensus.
Yes, that ideal of removal by consensus is an incredibly powerful form of accountability, isn't it? It echoes things like votes of no confidence or recall mechanisms we see in some systems today.
That is powerful. And that robust accountability where leaders are answerable. It sounds very much like a function of justice. Does ADL, the concept of justice in Islam, specifically cover things like equal treatment under the law?
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt. The principle of ADL is completely foundational. The Quran commands, and this is a direct quote, "O you who believe, stand out firmly for justice, as witnesses to Allah, even as against yourselves or your parents or your kin."
Wow, even against yourself or your family.
Exactly. It means no hierarchy, not even the ruler, is above the law. That's the ideal. And the Prophet also said something profound, connecting directly to human dignity. The most beloved people to Allah are those most beneficial to other people.
So leadership is about service.
It directly links leadership to serving the public good, not just holding power.
That idea, consensus removal, leaders being most beneficial, it sounds remarkably, democratic for its era. But the perception, as we keep saying, is often more towards autocratic rule historically in the Muslim world. How do we reconcile that? Was this ideal always practiced? Were there deviations?
That's a really excellent question, and that's where the nuance comes in, absolutely. The ideal was profound, no doubt, and we have solid examples of it in action.
Like?
Abu Bakr, the very first caliph after the prophet, he famously declared on taking office, "Obey me so long as I obey God and his prophet. If I deviate, correct me."
He invited correct.
He explicitly did. And history records incidents, quite a few, actually, where ordinary citizens openly questioned leaders, even challenged them, apparently without fear of reprisal. That points to a truly robust ideal of accountability.
But the ideal wasn't always the reality.
Well, like any human system, the ideal wasn't always perfectly implemented. Of course not. Power dynamics, political realities, human ambition, these sometimes overshadowed the principles. That led to autocratic periods, certainly.
Right.
But that speaks more to human failings or specific political contexts rather than a flaw in the underlying religious tenets themselves.
Okay, that makes sense. So if these core principles, consultation, justice, accountability, are so fundamental in Islamic thought, how do specific human rights fit in? Things we talk about today like freedom of speech, religious liberty, women's rights, minority rights, where do they sit in this framework?
They're deeply embedded, actually. Take freedom of faith. The Quran famously states, "No compulsion in religion." La ikraha fi din, that's verse 2.256. It establishes religious liberty as a cornerstone.
No compulsion. That's very clear.
It is. And beyond that, Islam recognizes fundamental rights. The right to life, obviously the right to property, privacy, family, these are all protected.
And women's rights, that's often a major point of contention in these discussions.
It is, and it's worth looking at historically. Islam granted women property rights and inheritance rights centuries before many European societies even considered it.
Centuries.
Yes. Now, that's not to say everything was perfect or that cultural practices didn't sometimes interfere, but in terms of the foundational legal framework for its time, it was quite progressive.
That's a really important historical context.
It is, and it's often overlooked. What becomes really striking is how these foundational Islamic principles, developed so long ago, resonate so strongly with modern frameworks. Think about the UN's 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Parallels?
Significant parallels. It suggests perhaps a shared human quest for justice and dignity that kind of transcends time and culture rather than some fundamental clash of civilizations.
Okay, so if the principles are so clear and they align, as you say, quite well with democratic ideals and human rights, the big question remains, why does the myth persist? Why do some Muslim majority countries today have, let's be honest, questionable records on democratic freedoms or human rights? Where's the disconnect?
Right, this is the absolute crucial point to grasp. The disconnect you see is primarily, overwhelmingly, due to politics and specific historical circumstances. It's not inherent to the faith itself.
Politics and history, not religion.
Largely, yes. Think about the factors involved. Long periods of colonial rule in many regions, which often dismantled existing structures or installed compliant rulers. Then the rise of post-colonial dictatorships in some places, often propped up during the Cold War, for instance. And protracted internal conflicts that destabilize societies. These have all massively shaped the political systems we see today.
And has religion been used to justify some of this?
Unfortunately, yes. In some cases, rulers have misused religious rhetoric to justify repression. That definitely happens. But, and this is key, these actions often directly contradict the true spirit and, frankly, the letter of Islamic law, which prioritizes justice and consultation, shura.
So it's a misuse, not an application of the principles.
Precisely. A political manipulation, often.
So, given these principles are so embedded, how has this played out historically or even today? Can we point to examples, real-world cases, where these democratic-leaning ideals have flourished in Muslim societies?
Oh, absolutely. There are good examples. Historically, you could look at places like medieval Cordoba or Baghdad. They had vibrant city councils. Records show active debate on public policy. Clear examples of early consultative governance in practice.
Okay, that's history. What about now?
Fast forward to today. Look at Indonesia. It's the world's largest Muslim-majority country, and it has a vibrant, constitutionally protected democracy. It's not perfect, no democracy is, but it functions.
East Indonesia, right. Any others?
Senegal is another strong example in West Africa. Malaysia, too, has a multi-party democracy. These are complex societies, certainly, but they successfully blend their cultural and religious identities with functioning democratic institutions.
So these examples, they really show it's not about Islam as a monolith being the issue.
Exactly. It demonstrates the issue isn't the faith itself, but rather the specific historical, political, and socioeconomic context of each nation.
And what about individual leaders? Any historical figures who really stand out for modeling this kind of openness you're describing?
One really outstanding example is Omar ibn al-Khattab. He was the second caliph.
After Abu Bakr.
Right. He actually instituted something very much like early town hall meetings. He actively encouraged public critique, people speaking up.
Really? He encouraged criticism?
Yes, and he established judicial oversight for all officials, including himself. He subjected himself to the law. This set an incredible precedent for transparency and accountability that was, frankly, revolutionary for that time period.
Okay, let's try and bring this home for you, the listener. Let's imagine a scenario. You're, say, a young law student, maybe named Lila. You're in a heated debate, could be online, could be in class. And someone confidently asserts Sharia law inherently bans elections and silences all dissent. You hear that kind of thing.
All the time.
How could you, or Lila in this scenario, effectively counter that based on what we've discussed?
Okay, good question. Well, first, you could calmly point out that the core sources, the Quran and the Sunnah, they explicitly support consultation, shura, justice, idal, and accountability. These are principles that fundamentally underpin modern democratic ideals.
Start with the sources.
Absolutely. Yeah. Then you could highlight the examples we just talked about. Both historical examples and present-day ones like Indonesia or Senegal demonstrate that Muslims do actively support and participate in these values.
Show it works in practice.
Exactly. And stress the distinction. The core issue isn't the faith itself. The problems arise when specific cultural norms or political factors, like dictatorships or the legacies of colonialism, interrupt or distort that inherent democratic spirit within the tradition.
So separating the faith from the political or cultural context.
It's crucial. Discerning between the ideal of the faith and its varied, often imperfect, human interpretations and implementations throughout history.
Right. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main takeaway? The central conclusion we want you, our listener, to walk away with. Is Islam fundamentally opposed to democracy and human rights?
The central conclusion really is a clear no. Islam's core principles, when you examine them closely, actually harmonize quite well with democratic ideals. They actively foster consultation, justice, accountability.
And the problems we see.
The oppressive regimes, the human rights issues, they generally stem from complex historical, political, and sometimes cultural factors, not usually from the religion itself, correctly understood.
Okay, so for you listening, what are some actionable insights? What can you do with this information?
Well, first, we'd really encourage you. Read some of the Quranic verses on justice, consultation, and freedom for yourself. Don't just take our word for it.
Go to the source.
Definitely. Second, when you look at history or current events, try to practice nuance. Really work to distinguish between the foundational teachings of the faith and, local cultural practices or raw political power plays. They aren't the same thing.
That's a key skill.
It is. And third, maybe most importantly, understand that you can advocate for rights, for justice, for democratic values from within the Islamic tradition. Recognize that Islamic ethics and modern democracy don't have to be enemies. They can actually be powerful allies in building a more just society.
Working together, not against each other.
Precisely. Islam, really at its heart, encourages critical thinking. It encourages robust debate, asking questions, and having a deep sense of care for the community for the well-being of others.
So the final thought we want to leave you with?
We challenge you. Study the sources. Ask the tough questions. Actively push back against those easy stereotypes you hear. Because knowledge, real knowledge, doesn't just inform, it leads to deeper understanding, and that's where positive change really begins.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We genuinely hope you feel more informed, maybe more empowered, to engage with this really important topic.
And maybe even start your own deep dive.
Absolutely. Explore the sources we mentioned. Keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep learning and keep asking questions.